My life with Mark was the kind of life you'd see on a stock photo website. It was sickeningly perfect. We had the sprawling suburban house with the freshly mowed lawn, the 2 cars in the driveway, and the daughter Lily, whose smile could genuinely cure the common cold. Mark was the classic provider, a successful project manager always cracking dad jokes, the kind of guy who insisted on helping little old ladies cross the street. He was my rock, my safe harbor, the man who made me believe that happily ever after wasn't just a fairy tale, but a mortgage we paid every month. The shift wasn't a seismic shock. It was a hairline fracture in the foundation. Started with a sound, or rather the lack of one. Our bedroom is at the end of the hall. Lily's room is directly across from ours. We have a routine bath, bedtime story, a kiss, and then silence until morning. One Tuesday night I woke up suddenly. Not from a nightmare but from an absence of noise. The house was too quiet. I rolled over expecting to see Mark beside me. His side of the bed was empty. The sheets were cool, meaning he hadn't just gotten up for a late-night glass of water. "Mark," I whispered, half asleep. No answer. My first thought was completely innocent. He was checking the security system, or maybe he'd stepped out onto the balcony to take a call he didn't want to wake me for. But a small, cold knot tightened in my chest. I glanced at the clock, 2:17 a.m. I got up, pulling on my silk robe. The house's floor plan is simple. Kitchen downstairs, bedrooms upstairs. I walked silently across the hall toward the balcony door. No light shone from there. But as I passed Lily's door, I heard it. A faint, almost imperceptible creak. It was the sound of a door closing too slowly. A door being eased shut by someone who didn't want the latch to click. My breath hitched. Lily was 10 years old. She rarely woke up in the night, and when she did, she always called out for me. I froze, heart hammering against my ribs. I stood there for a full minute, listening to the silence that followed the soft thud of the door finally settling into its frame. Every irrational fear, a burglar, a stray animal, flashed through my mind, but they were all instantly dismissed by the nagging suspicion fueled by the timing and the silence. I turned the knob to our bedroom. Mark was already back in bed. He lay on his side, his back to me, breathing deeply and evenly. He looked utterly serene, as if he'd been there all night. "Where were you?" My voice was quiet, but it held a slight tremor. He rolled over, squinting. "Huh, just using the bathroom, babe. You okay?" His face was guileless, sleepy. His eyes didn't dart away. My body relaxed fractionally. He was probably telling the truth. I must have imagined the creak, or perhaps Lily just shifted in her sleep. "Yeah, fine. Just a bad dream," I lied, climbing back under the duvet. But the moment he turned his back to me again, I knew. His sleep was too deep, too sudden. There was no drowsy confusion, no lingering grogginess from being truly roused. He had been awake in active moments before. The knot returned harder this time. It wasn't a nightmare I was waking up from. It was a waking nightmare I was sinking into. The incident would have been an isolated event, a strange midnight anomaly, if it hadn't happened again. And again. The pattern established itself with chilling regularity. Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday nights. Always between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. Always the same sequence. The cold, empty spot beside me, the hushed movement, and the barely there whisper of Lily's door latch being gently defeated. I started pretending to be asleep. This was harder than it sounds. I'd lie there rigid, listening to the clock tick its way toward 2 a.m., my mind conjuring horrifying scenarios. One Thursday I watched him go. I kept my breathing steady, my eyes shut just enough to peer through my lashes. He didn't check to see if I was awake. He simply slid out of bed with a practiced, unnatural grace. He moved like a predator, silent and low to the ground. He stopped outside Lily's door. He stood there for a beat, a long, agonizing beat, and then the knob turned. Slowly, soundlessly. The door widened just enough for his large frame to slip inside. My heart didn't just pound, it seized. I had to physically restrain myself from jumping out of bed and screaming. But the instinct to protect Lily was coupled with a desperate need for knowledge. If I rushed in now, I'd find him doing something he could explain away, something he could deny, something he could twist into my overreaction. I need proof, a cold, strategic voice whispered in the terror. If I confront him without proof, he will gaslight me, and he will just find a better way to hide. 5 minutes later, the door creaked again. He emerged, his silhouette dark against the pale hallway light. His shoulders were strangely hunched. He didn't look triumphant or satisfied. He looked burdened. He came back to bed, and this time when I asked him where he'd been, I already knew his answer. Just checked on the alarm, babe. Go back to sleep. His lie tasted like ash in my mouth. This wasn't just a father checking on his sleeping child. This was a secret operation. Fathers who checked on their children didn't sneak. They didn't wait until the dead of night. They didn't lie about it. The idyllic stock photo of our life had become a faded, terrifying negative. The man sleeping next to me was a stranger, and he was sneaking into our daughter's room every night. My initial assumption, the one that made my stomach churn and my blood run cold, was the darkest possible thing. I had to know the truth, whatever the cost. I was no longer a wife. I was an investigator, a protector. And my first move had to be silent, swift, and undeniable. The realization hit me. I needed eyes where I wasn't. The days that followed the realization were an exercise in controlled insanity. I was living a double life. By day I was Sarah, the cheerful mother who packed Lily's lunch with little heart-shaped sandwiches and laughed at Mark's terrible puns over dinner. By night, I was a covert operative whose mission was to gather intelligence on the man she still, bafflingly, shared a bed with. My focus narrowed to the man's pattern, his subtle tells, his vulnerabilities. I needed to understand the why of his stealth. If he was truly just checking on Lily, why the secrecy? Why the lies? I started with physical evidence. I spent hours subtly inspecting Lily's room. I looked under the bed, inside her closet, and around her bedside table, searching for anything out of place. A toy moved, a strange item. Anything that didn't belong to a 10-year-old girl. Nothing. The room was pristine, exactly as I had last tidied it. But then I found the footprints. Mark had a habit of wearing his favorite pair of fuzzy dark blue slippers around the house. They were quiet, comfortable, and left no noticeable sound on the thick carpet of the hall. But in Lily's room, the carpet was a lighter cream-colored wool. One afternoon, when Lily was at school and Mark was at work, I knelt by the door frame and looked closely. In the late afternoon light, angled just right, I saw the very faint indentation pattern of the slipper's rubber sole, leading a short distance into the room. It was not the distinct print of someone walking normally, but the shadow of pressure left by someone standing still, right by the bed. It was confirmation that he wasn't just peeking from the doorway. He was entering and lingering. I took my phone, angled it awkwardly, and snapped a picture, knowing a low-res photo of faint impressions wasn't the proof I needed, but it was fuel for my rage. The investigation moved from passive observation to active testing. I needed to know how deep his denial went, and how quickly he'd resort to gaslighting. I chose a Friday morning, 2 days after his last nocturnal visit. We were having breakfast. Mark. I started casually, stirring my coffee. I had a weird dream last night. I thought I heard someone walking around the hall. He didn't even look up from his newspaper. Old house, honey. Pipes settle. No, I mean right outside the room. I thought maybe Lily woke up or you got up. He lowered the paper, his expression perfectly neutral, maybe even a little pitying. It wasn't me, Sarah. I slept like a rock. Maybe you're stressed about that work project. He had deflected instantly. No hesitation. No hint of guilt. He'd flipped the suspicion back onto my mental state. The whisper campaign. He was trying to make the truth so quiet that I'd dismiss it as my own invention. It's just, I've noticed the door to Lily's room sometimes doesn't close properly. You know? Like the latch isn't catching. He frowned slightly. If it's the latch, I'll tighten the screws this weekend. Don't worry about it. He was dismissive, subtly communicating that my concerns were petty and mechanical, not emotional and alarming. He was shutting down the conversation, not solving the mystery. The man was a master manipulator, and I was only now seeing the strings. The final step before the camera involved the purchase. I couldn't simply order a camera online. Mark managed the finances, and any unusual purchase, especially a discreet one, would raise a red flag on the shared accounts. I engineered an afternoon alone. "I need a girls' day, Mark," I announced Sunday morning. "I'm taking Lily to the mall for a movie and some new clothes. We'll be back late." He smiled broadly. "That's wonderful, you two deserve it. Take my card." I took his card, a chilling detail I would later use. The girls' day was a perfect cover. Lily, delighted by the surprise movie, distracted me momentarily from the horror brewing at home. But afterward, while Lily was happily trying on shoes, I slipped away. I drove 10 miles out of our town to a nondescript electronics store, one I knew Mark would never frequent. I went straight to the security section. The choices were overwhelming. Nanny cams disguised as teddy bears, motion detectors, night vision. I needed something small, reliable, and absolutely undetectable. I chose a micro USB charger camera. It looked exactly like a standard iPhone charging cube. It plugged directly into the wall, was always on, and had perfect night vision capabilities. It stored footage on a small hidden SD card. It was ingenious and disturbingly easy to acquire. As the clerk rang up the purchase, the guilt, the shame, and the fear crashed over me. I am buying spy equipment to record my own husband in my own daughter's room. This was not a healthy marriage. This was a war of attrition, and I was arming myself. I paid cash, using money I had been saving for years in a separate emergency fund, then used Mark's card to buy a few expensive, noticeable items, a new dress, some perfume, to cover the time spent in the unusual trip. I needed a clear, innocent trail. The installation was the most nerve-wracking part. The camera had to be placed tonight. I couldn't wait. The anxiety was a physical weight in my chest. I waited until Mark was downstairs watching a Sunday night football game, deeply engrossed. Lily was asleep. I took the camera, the instruction manual, and a roll of electrical tape into the hall closet under the guise of finding a misplaced blanket. Lily's room had a specific outlet, one located near the door, easily visible but positioned at an angle near a low bookshelf. The perfect sight line. I slipped into Lily's room, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The light coming through the window was faint. I moved quickly, pulling the bulky, normal charger currently in the outlet and replacing it with the micro camera. It looked exactly right, nondescript, functional. I then did the one thing that made me feel utterly despicable. I tested it. I activated the camera's Wi-Fi signal, which would only broadcast when I pressed a hidden button, connected it to my phone and checked the feed. The view was clear. Lily, small and innocent, tucked under her duvet. The bookshelf to the left. The window to the right. The field of vision captured the entire room, including the floor by her bed. The night vision, a cold green filter, made everything look clinical and terrifying. It sees everything, I thought, pulling the camera offline and shutting off the Wi-Fi. I retreated to the hall, my adrenaline surging. I hadn't spent more than 2 minutes in the room. Mark didn't notice a thing. He was still shouting at the screen when I returned to the living room. "Found the blanket," I said, tossing a random throw onto the sofa. He grunted, his eyes fixed on the game. "Good." I sat beside him, forcing my body to relax, forcing my mind to focus on the trivialities of the game. But inside I was screaming. The trap was set. The waiting game, the final agonizing countdown, had begun. I knew with bone-deep certainty that Mark would make his visit tonight. Sunday night. The pattern was unbreakable. I would finally have my proof. The whisper campaign was about to be silenced by the undeniable, stark reality of the footage. The moment I returned to the living room, the atmosphere shifted from domestic banality to suffocating suspense. Mark was still shouting at the screen, oblivious. But every cell in my body was screaming, "It is in place. The trap is sprung." I couldn't look at him. Every smile he offered, every casual touch of his hand, felt like a contamination. I went through the motions of a Sunday night, pretending to be interested in the score, clearing the dinner dishes, but my movements were mechanical, my mind already fast-forwarding to 2 a.m. The sheer agony of the waiting was a story in itself. Mark and I went to bed at 11:30 p.m. The final few hours of normal, before the scheduled intrusion, were the most difficult to navigate. I had to maintain the charade of relaxation, of affection. He reached for me. My skin crawled, but I couldn't flinch. Any change in my behavior, any sudden coldness, and his predator senses might kick in. He was a creature of habit, and I needed him to follow his routine perfectly. "Rough week, Sarah?" he murmured, pulling me close. "A little," I managed, my voice tight. "Just tired." "Sleep then. I'll see you in the morning." I lay there, wrapped in the arms of the man who was about to betray us both on high-definition video. The irony was a physical sickness. I faked my breathing pattern, aiming for the deep, slow rhythm of someone truly asleep. My eyelids were shut, but my mind was screamingly awake. I focused on the clock on the bedside table. 11:58 p.m., 12:15 a.m., 1 a.m. Every tick of the digital display felt like a hammer blow against my skull. The house settled into the profound silence of the deep night. The silence became an entity, heavy and pressurized, anticipating the breach. The mental anguish in that waiting period was absolute. My imagination, unchecked, ran riot. I didn't just fear the worst, I prepared for it. What if the camera failed? What if he was smarter than me and found it? What if the unthinkable was the truth? I visualized the footage, the moment of revelation, the horrifying confirmation of my deepest, most agonizing fear for Lily. The fear for my daughter was a hot, blinding flash, but it was quickly replaced by a cold, sharp determination. If he was doing the unthinkable, I wouldn't just call the police. I would destroy him. I would ensure his ruin was so total and so public that he would spend the rest of his life paying for every second of Lily's fear. But then the seeds of doubt, planted so expertly by Mark's gaslighting, began to sprout in the dark. What if I'm wrong? What if he was truly just going in to place a childhood comfort item he remembered she liked? What if he had a secret, benign ritual, a deep but misunderstood paternal need? Maybe he was dealing with some deep-seated trauma and was just watching her sleep to feel safe. This rationalization was his final subconscious defense mechanism working on my mind. It was the whisper of a loving wife trying to protect the marriage. I had to suppress it ruthlessly. Fathers do not sneak and lie. The secrecy was the crime regardless of the act. 2:05 a.m. The temperature dropped. The air shifted. I didn't need to look at the clock to know the time had arrived. I could feel the change in his breathing, the shift from relaxed, deep exhalations to the shallow, controlled breaths of someone concentrating fiercely. He moved. It was the same practiced, silent slide out of the bed. The mattress barely shifted. The springs didn't squeak. He was truly a professional at this. I kept my eyes shut, my breathing steady, though my heart was now a frantic, trapped bird in my chest. I heard the almost imperceptible thump of his bare feet hitting the carpet. Then the final steps toward the door, the gentle turning of the knob, and the silent easing of the bedroom door open. He was gone. The relief that the moment was finally happening mingled with a renewed, crushing wave of horror. I was finally truly alone. I had done my job. The bait had been taken. I waited 5 seconds, ensuring his focus was now entirely on Lily's room. I reached for my phone, which was hidden beneath my pillow. I pressed the power button, shielded the light with the sheets, and used the small gap in my lashes to see the screen. I had meticulously prepared the single access point, a private encrypted cloud storage link for the footage download. I was not going to watch it live. I needed to download the whole sequence and then delete the connection history. In the dark, fumbling slightly, I accessed the app. I saw the prompt, "Camera live." Recording initiated at 2:07 a.m. The red recording light on the camera itself was invisible to the naked eye, but the software confirmed it was working perfectly. I quickly initiated the download of the live feed and the previous night's test footage onto a separate, password-protected folder on my phone. The app's interface showed a small timeline with the duration counter climbing rapidly. Every second was an agonizing eternity. I imagined the camera's cold, green eye watching Mark as he stood over Lily. What is he doing? I heard nothing from the hall. No sounds, no voices, nothing that suggested a comforting word or a kiss on the forehead. Just the absolute unnatural quiet of a secret being kept. After what felt like an hour but was probably only 7 minutes, I heard the faint snick of the doorknob again. The door eased shut. He walked past our room, his steps again impossibly silent. He slid back into bed. I kept the phone under the sheets for another 30 seconds, watching the download progress bar inch towards 100%. I needed to ensure the camera was fully disconnected before he could possibly notice anything. The moment the download completed, I killed the app, deleted the hidden Wi-Fi connection, and placed the phone back under the pillow, careful not to jostle Mark. He settled in beside me, his breathing returning to normal, but I noticed something new this time. A faint musky scent. It wasn't sweat or cologne. It was the subtle metallic scent of anxiety mixed with something earthy, something I couldn't place. I felt his presence beside me, heavy and suffocating. I didn't know what I had captured, but I knew I had it. The truth was locked away, inches from his sleeping body. Mark rolled over toward me, throwing an arm across my waist. "Night, honey," he mumbled, half asleep. It was a terrifying moment of intimacy. I wanted to recoil, to scream, to lash out. But I simply endured it, calculating. "Night, Mark," I whispered back, my voice completely dead. I couldn't sleep. The adrenaline was too potent. I waited until 5 a.m., the first hints of dawn staining the eastern sky, before I quietly slipped out of bed. Mark was now in a heavy, deep sleep. I took my phone, grabbed my gym bag, pre-packed the night before, and crept downstairs. I needed distance. I needed total isolation. I left the house telling myself I was just going for a workout. But I drove past the gym, past the coffee shop, and kept driving until I reached a quiet, isolated park overlooking the lake, miles away from our perfect, terrifying suburban prison. I parked the car, turned off the engine, and stared at the dark screen of my phone. The footage was there. My fate was sealed within a 7-minute video file. I took a deep, shuddering breath, braced myself against the steering wheel, and tapped the icon. The green night vision footage flickered to life. The view of Lily's quiet room, the gentle rise and fall of her chest under the duvet, was painfully clear. I watched, and what I saw was not what I expected. The phone screen glowed with the cold, green light of night vision. The only sound in the car was the gentle lapping of the lake and the frantic, shallow gasps of my own breath. I watched as the scene unfolded, my hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles were white. The first few moments were just the ambient stillness of the room. Lily's small, innocent form asleep, the shadows deep and strange under the camera's unblinking eye. Then the door opened. 2:07 a.m. Mark slipped inside. He moved like a ghost, easing the door shut with excruciating care. My heart rate spiked, expecting the worst. My mind screamed the dark, preloaded script. He's going to hurt her. He's going to do something unspeakable. He didn't go to the bed immediately. He stood still for a long, terrible moment, silhouetted in the doorway. He looked around the room, not with the look of a predator surveying his prey, but with the look of someone frightened, paranoid, and profoundly burdened. He then approached the bed slowly, cautiously. He knelt beside Lily's mattress. And this is where the predictable horror movie I was expecting completely shattered, replaced by something far more complex, and in a way far more chilling. He didn't touch her. He didn't lift the covers. Instead, Mark reached under the bed. He pulled out a worn wooden treasure chest. It was Lily's. She'd kept her most valued trinkets in it since she was 6. He opened the chest, and the camera's microphone picked up the quiet squeak of the hinge. He reached in, rummaging briefly. My breath stalled. What was he looking for? Money? Drugs? Something he was hiding? He pulled something small and metallic out. It looked like a keychain. He stared at it for a moment, then pocketed it. He then pulled out a small plush stuffed bunny, Lily's favorite, Mr. Fluff, which she had insisted must stay in her treasure chest, not her bed. Mark held the bunny briefly, his large hands dwarfing the toy. He pressed his face against it, a gesture so loaded with pathetic sadness that it made me momentarily dizzy. He was inhaling the scent of the toy, the scent of her. He gently placed the bunny back in the chest, closed the lid, and slid it back under the bed. He stayed there on his knees for another minute, simply watching Lily sleep. He looked like a man drowning, clinging to the sight of his daughter as his only lifeline. He kissed her pillow, not her. A furtive, quick press of the lips against the fabric near her head. He didn't risk waking her. Then he stood up, his shoulders slumped, and crept out of the room. The entire sequence lasted exactly 7 minutes and 15 seconds. I replayed the footage immediately. I watched it 3 more times. The dark assumption was wrong. He wasn't physically harming her. He wasn't sexually abusing her. But the relief that should have flooded my veins was choked by a new, more insidious kind of horror. The act was not one of violence, but one of desperate, agonizing secrecy. He was seeking comfort, yes, but he was also searching for something and hiding something. And the elaborate lies, the sneaking, the gaslighting, it was all designed to conceal a truth about himself or a truth about their relationship that was clearly devastating. I paused the video on the frame where he looked at the keychain. It was a cheap plastic keyring, nothing remarkable. But what was the significance? And why was he hiding this search from me? I needed to connect the dots. I needed to understand the twist. I replayed the footage of him leaving and noticed the strange, musky scent I had smelled on him. It wasn't just anxiety. It was the earthy smell of disturbed soil, maybe? Or wood and dust. I searched the video for any other subtle clues. The shadow of his jacket. The way he walked. And then I saw it in the first minute of the footage while he was still standing near the doorway. Tucked between 2 bookshelves, almost invisible, was a framed photograph. It was a picture of Mark, Lily, and me, taken on Lily's 8th birthday. Mark's hand moved almost imperceptibly as he entered the room. He didn't touch the picture, but he checked it. He checked that it was still there. The picture, the hidden chest, the keychain, the quiet despair. It all clicked into place, giving rise to the true, paralyzing betrayal. I drove back home, the sun now fully up, casting long shadows. My head was clearer, but my heart was now encased in ice. The fear had curdled into a cold, hard rage. This was not a case of an abusive husband. This was a case of a husband leading a complete parallel life. A life he desperately needed to hide. I went straight to Lily's room. I knelt exactly where he had. I pulled out the treasure chest. Lily's sparkly plastic necklaces, her favorite river stones, her drawings. Underneath it all, I found the imprint of the small keychain he had pocketed. The key was small brass and bore a distinctive jagged cut. It was a key to a security box. I knew this key. It wasn't one to our house, our shed, or our mailbox. It was a key he had once told me was for his old college locker, long ago discarded. He'd lied. Then the second, more crushing piece of the puzzle. I went to the spot where he checked the picture frame. I picked up the frame of our family photo. The back was sealed but loose. I used a fingernail and peeled the cardboard backing away. Taped to the inside of the backing, invisible unless you disassembled the frame, was a small folded legal document. I unfolded it. My vision swam. It was a trust fund document. The beneficiary was Lily. The executor was Mark. The date on the document was 3 years ago, a time when he had suddenly taken a business trip I had found suspicious. The terms were specific and devastating. The fund was large, nearly $1 million. It was to be used solely for Lily's education and well-being, and it was completely inaccessible to me. Furthermore, there was a clause. In the event of Mark's disappearance, death, or inability to perform his duties as executor, the funds would immediately be released to a designated attorney, with the instruction that Lily be transferred to the guardianship of a woman named Victoria Hayes. Victoria Hayes. The name hit me like a physical blow. Victoria Hayes was Mark's first girlfriend from high school, whom I thought he hadn't spoken to in 2 decades. The true twist materialized, sickening and complete. Mark was preparing for a permanent escape. He wasn't checking on Lily. He was checking on his escape plan's components, the proof of funds, the secret guardian, the hidden key. He was sneaking in because this entire meticulous preparation for his departure and Lily's handover was his darkest secret. He didn't want the life assurance policy to go to me. He didn't want me to raise Lily if he left or died. He wanted a complete severance, a clean break, and a replacement mother he trusted more than his own wife. The keychain he'd taken was likely for a safe deposit box containing crucial documents, and he had hidden the key in the one place I would never look. Lily's childhood treasure chest, protected by the assumption that he was a monster, not a traitor. The footage wasn't about a predator. It was about a calculated long-term abandonment and a deep systemic betrayal of my trust and my role as a mother. My knees buckled. I wasn't married to a loving husband. I was married to a ghost, a shell who had been systematically dismantling our life and cutting me out of my daughter's future. The sneaking wasn't sinister. It was strategic. And the revenge needed to be equally strategic and utterly devastating. He didn't just break my heart. He had meticulously plotted to destroy my future with my own child. The game had just changed. The cold rage that settled in my heart was a new kind of clarity. Fear had made me reactive. Betrayal made me strategic. Mark wanted a clean cut, a seamless exit into a new life with Victoria Hayes, leaving me legally neutered and emotionally devastated. I was not going to give him a clean cut. I was going to surgically remove every pillar of his life and watch the entire structure collapse. The first step was to move the war into the shadows. I had to continue acting like the oblivious, happily married Sarah while building a case that would make him legally, financially, and professionally radioactive. The trust fund document was the blueprint for his betrayal, but it was also my greatest weapon. It showed intent and premeditation. I immediately scanned the document and forwarded the image to Amelia Reed, a sharp, merciless divorce attorney I knew from a brief professional contact years ago. I did not call her. I used an encrypted messaging app one downloaded specifically for this purpose. Her response was chillingly direct. This isn't just divorce. This is fraud and abandonment. We need to secure every liquid asset before he files. My financial strategy began. I knew Mark had a significant bonus incoming next month. I opened a separate, secure bank account in my name only. I changed the passwords on all joint credit cards, creating a security alert that rerouted all notifications to my personal email, not his. I then took out a substantial cash advance on our primary joint credit card, enough to cover all my legal fees and immediate relocation costs, and deposited it into my new account. Mark, who rarely checked the statements, would only see the balance increase, not the withdrawal source until the bill arrived. He wanted to control the money. I would liquidate the control. I still needed the contents of the box the keychain belonged to. I knew he was extremely possessive of his work briefcase. I decided to strike when he was most relaxed. Friday night, Mark came home tired. I pretended to be ill, sent Lily to watch a movie in her room, and mixed Mark a strong muscle relaxer into his evening scotch, a safe, over-the-counter sedative that would guarantee deep, uninterrupted sleep. At midnight, he was dead to the world. I rifled through his briefcase. There, tucked into a false lining, was a receipt for a private storage facility 20 miles outside of town, the specific address to the safe deposit box. The next morning, while Mark was at the gym, I drove to the facility. The jagged key worked perfectly. The box contained a damning trove. First, there's a second, notarized version of the trust fund document, with the same name, Victoria Hayes, followed by Mark's complete travel itinerary and visa applications for 3 South American countries, all dated for travel 3 months from now. He wasn't just planning on leaving. He had a departure date. There's also a signed letter of resignation to his company, to be submitted via email the day before his trip. And lastly, the box contained a recent photo of Victoria Hayes with a personalized, tender inscription on the back that confirmed a recent, ongoing emotional and possibly physical affair. The evidence was overwhelming. He wasn't just leaving me. He was leaving the country, and he was taking all his portable wealth and funneling Lily's future into the hands of his long-lost flame. Mark's entire self-worth was tied up in his professional success. His job wasn't just income. It was his identity. His company, Apex Solutions, had a strict zero-tolerance policy regarding financial malfeasance and internal fraud, especially concerning project accounts. I knew from eavesdropping on his work calls that Mark was managing the budget for a massive multi-million-dollar government contract, Project Chimera. I spent 2 days learning about his accounting software, which he had foolishly left logged in on his work laptop. I noticed a pattern. He had created a series of small, repetitive, and completely legal transfers, listed as consulting fees, to a shell corporation named VH Solutions LLC. VH Solutions. Victoria Hayes. The total transfers amounted to nearly $50,000 over the past year. This wasn't outright theft. It was soft, plausible fraud, padding a consulting budget and funneling the money to his mistress's company to fund their escape. I anonymously mailed a detailed bulleted document, created on a public library computer, to the CEO, the general counsel, and the head of internal audit at Apex Solutions. The document contained 3 items. 1. The specific dates and amounts of the $50,000 in VH Solutions transfers. 2. A copy of the inscribed photo of Victoria Hayes, tying the VH to his personal life. 3. A subtle cryptic hint about the resignation letter that was scheduled for future delivery, suggesting his current actions were part of an orchestrated exit strategy. I didn't accuse him of running away. I accused him of embezzlement and compromise of a government contract. The results were instantaneous and catastrophic. By Monday afternoon, the company launched a full internal audit. Mark was placed on immediate administrative leave. When he came home early, pale and shell-shocked, he tried to downplay it. Technical glitch, honey. Just a few issues with a vendor payment. Be back tomorrow. I nodded calmly. I hope so, Mark. You worked so hard for that promotion. His lie was pathetically transparent. The demolition had begun. I set the stage for the final confrontation precisely 2 weeks later, after Amelia had secured an emergency court order freezing all of Mark's assets above a state-mandated minimum. I arranged a dinner party. Not a small one, but a grand one. I invited Mark's closest colleagues, including his now suspicious boss, his parents, and our shared friends. I even made sure Lily was dressed up and present. Mark, still desperate to appear normal and save his collapsing professional facade, played the gracious host. At the peak of the dinner, just as everyone was enjoying coffee and dessert, I stood up and clinked a spoon against a wine glass. I just wanted to make a small toast, I said, my voice sweet and steady. To Mark, my husband, the man who is such a great father. He secretly plans for his daughter's future. Mark looked visibly relieved. He thought I was finally going to praise him for the phantom promotion. I walked over to the buffet table. I didn't raise my voice. You know, for 2 weeks, I've been sleeping next to a stranger who has been planning to leave the country in 3 months with his high school girlfriend, Victoria Hayes, and cut me entirely out of my daughter's life. He has spent the last year treating me like a prop in a photograph. A collective gasp went around the room. Mark's face drained of blood, turning a sickly gray. Sarah, what are you doing? He hissed, half standing, trying to keep up the pretense. I'm introducing reality to the stock photo, Mark. And I brought show and tell. I pulled out 3 laminated pieces of paper. The photo of Victoria Hayes with his tender inscription. The printout of the VH Solutions transfers from Project Chimera's account, and a copy of the trust fund document naming Victoria as Lily's sole guardian. I didn't hand them out. I simply held them up, letting the guests read the names and the dates. That's his exit strategy, I said, gesturing to the documents. He was sneaking into Lily's room not to protect her, but to check his documents and his escape route, all hidden in her treasure box. He was hiding his betrayal right next to our daughter's most innocent secrets. Then came the kill shot, delivered with a look of pure cold pity. He won't be joining Victoria, however. Not in 3 months and not ever. As of yesterday, our attorney Amelia Reed, secured a court order freezing all joint assets. Your company, Apex Solutions, is currently performing an internal audit on Project Chimera. You can't leave the country, Mark. And by the time the FBI finishes reviewing the government contract transfers you made to VH Solutions, you won't be going anywhere further than a courtroom. Mark stood up, knocking his chair over with a crash. All pretense of a polite dinner party vanished. He looked at his parents, his boss, and then back at me, his eyes wide with disbelief and burning hatred. You lunatic! You ruined me! He bellowed, finally dropping the mask. No, Mark, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that carried across the stunned silence. You ruined yourself. I just recorded the evidence and delivered the consequences. He lunged for me, but his boss and his father intervened, grabbing his arms. I want you out of this house tonight. The locks are already scheduled to change at 8 a.m. You are toxic to me and you are a risk to our daughter, I stated clearly, addressing the room, making them all witnesses. His father dragged him, screaming obscenities, toward the front door. I turned back to the room where my daughter Lily, blessedly confused and focused only on the dropped dessert, asked, Mommy, is Daddy really not coming back tonight? I knelt down, looked into her eyes, and gave her the honest, painful truth. He is not, sweetie. But you and I are safe now, and we are going to start a new, much better life. The demolition was complete. The mask was off, the career was terminated, the money was frozen, and the entire public facade was shattered. The moment Mark was dragged screaming out the front door, the silence that fell over the house was not peaceful. It was hollow and deafening. The guests, his colleagues, his friends, his own parents, dispersed quickly, their faces a mixture of shock, disgust, and the sudden terrible realization that they had just witnessed the complete annihilation of a human being's life. Lily, thankfully, was more confused by the noise than by the substance of the argument. I managed to shepherd her to bed, promising her that everything would be okay, that Daddy just needed to go away for a while. That night, I slept curled up beside her, my body a human shield against the terror Mark had manufactured. I finally felt a deep, profound sense of safety that I hadn't realized was missing for months. The weeks that followed were consumed by the meticulous, clinical process of divorce court. My attorney, Amelia, was a predator in a sharp suit. Mark, now isolated, fired from his job, and facing a potential federal investigation into the misuse of Project Chimera funds, was quickly reduced to a cornered animal. The frozen assets crippled him. The evidence, the footage, the documents, the VH Solutions paper trail was undeniable. The trust fund, his great attempt at controlling Lily's future, was ruled an attempt to circumvent marital property law and child support obligations. It backfired spectacularly. The judge saw it as evidence of calculated intent to abandon. He tried to fight for visitation, claiming I was mentally unstable and had fabricated the entire story. Amelia presented the hidden camera footage. Not the 7 minutes of him kneeling, but the context, the consistent, deceptive pattern of his sneaking, followed by the revelation of the key and the hidden documents. Your Honor, Amelia argued, Mr. Thorne did not just seek to leave his marriage. He sought to erase his wife's role as mother and partner, diverting funds and control to a complete stranger. His actions were not the acts of a father but of a strategist planning a full-scale abandonment, and he used his daughter's room as his secret vault. The ruling was swift and final. I was granted full custody. Mark was required to pay substantial child support based on his former high-earning potential, which Amelia fought fiercely to ensure. The judge allowed for highly restricted, supervised visitation, a condition Mark quickly allowed to lapse as his shame and financial ruin deepened. His professional life was beyond salvage. The internal audit at Apex Solutions uncovered broader, systemic fraud linked to his position. He faced civil lawsuits from the company, and the looming threat of criminal charges related to the government contract fraud. He would never hold a position of respect or power again. The calculated demolition was complete. The house felt different. After Mark's few remaining belongings were removed, a cold, sterile process handled by Amelia's team, the oppressive weight of the past year lifted. I changed the color of our bedroom walls. I threw away the old slippers. I had a security system installed that was for my peace of mind, not his control. The hardest part was navigating Lily's questions. She missed the Mark who laughed loudly and fixed things, not the ghost who had been sneaking around. I never showed her the footage. I never told her the details of Victoria Hayes or the financial fraud. I simply told her the truth she needed. Daddy made some choices that hurt us, sweetie. Big secret choices. He's sick, and he needed to go away to get better. Sometimes people who love you still make really bad choices. But I made a choice too. My choice was to make sure you and I are safe and happy forever. Lily, with the resilient heart of a child, accepted it. Her life normalized quickly: school, friends, gymnastics. The trauma of the discovery was mine alone, and I was fiercely committed to keeping her shielded from the fallout. My own recovery was slower. The rage gave way to a quiet, exhausting sorrow. The grief for the life I thought I had, and the realization that the last decade was built on a charismatic, meticulous lie. The perfect Mark had never existed. He was a mask, and the true man was a coward planning his great escape. I started a small online consulting business, using the skills I had let atrophy during my time as the perfect wife. Amelia had secured enough assets and support that we were stable, but I needed to build my own future. One that wasn't reliant on any man's paycheck or promise. Months later, I received the final divorce decree. I stood at the kitchen counter, reading the dry, formal language that dissolved our 11-year marriage. I was officially single, solvent, and safe. I thought about the night I set up the camera. The fear, the doubt, the terrible assumptions. The relief that Mark wasn't a monster who would harm Lily physically was quickly eclipsed by the knowledge that he was a monster who would harm her future, her security, and her emotional well-being. All in the name of his own escape. The hidden camera wasn't just a recording device. It was the catalyst of my freedom. It forced me to stop whispering my fears and start acting on facts. It turned me from a victim of gaslighting into the architect of my own rescue. I looked down the long hallway toward Lily's room. No more creeping. No more secrets. Just the normal, sometimes messy, sometimes loud sound of a happy 10-year-old growing up. My life wasn't the stock photo anymore. It was real. It was scarred, but it was strong. I had paid a heavy price for my education and human betrayal, but I had saved my daughter and rebuilt my life from the rubble. I learned that sometimes the most terrifying enemy lives in your own bed. And sometimes the only way to save yourself is to set a trap, get the evidence, and execute a cold, clean demolition. I put the divorce papers in the recycling bin. The past was evidence and the future was wide open.